Hey guys, so as you know, I'm a Tottenham fan. This might be actually backwards. I'm gonna put this up. And I got this scarf from the stadium in 2008 when me and my then fiance went, my girlfriend, I think, now my wife, went over there and it's was my childhood growing up. I grew up near this stadium in Islington. My mom worked in Islington, and um, and my parents were young at the time, and my mom being a single mom at that time, we were there. We went to summer camp. She dropped us at camp and went to work in Islington. Camp was near Highbury, a place called Barnesbury, a very posh neighborhood now. When I look at real estate prices over there, it's really posh. As a kid, I didn't know that. Very privileged of us to go to this camp, and Tottenham, the club at the time, came down and took care of us and bought. We're kids. They bought us hats and like ice pops and different things like that. Now, what I'm hearing with the Superliga, it's sort of sad because it would take that away from the community. I'm not saying it molded me and made me a better person by experiencing that love from the club when I was a kid. And I wasn't even into football then. I hated football. I was about 12, 13 when I was there, and I was into tennis. As kids, we used to roll these cigarettes up and smoke them in the bushes in the play in a playground. And I was into girls. One of the girls I was into was a French girl named Chantel. So I wasn't really into football. I loved tennis at the time. But the love that this for the community that the club had, and Arsenal was nearby for our camp. They never came to our camp, but Tottenham did, and that's why I'm a lifetime Tottenham fan. Right? I'm not a fan of Tottenham because I saw them on TV, or I went to the game and I bought a hot dog and I was like, this is the best hot dog I've ever had. Or I had a beer at the stadium and this is the best beer I've ever had. Or I just went to the stadium and was like, oh my God, this stadium is so magnificent. I'm a fan of the club now. It did not happen like that. It happened from my childhood. I saw the love they got us as kids. Um, and I was like, as an adult, when I started watching football, I saw Arsenal and Tottenham play in 2005, 2004. They had like it was like a league game, and it's one of Henry's last game with the club. And it was like a 4-5 game, and Arsenal won five goals, and Tottenham got four. And it was like to this day, I think the best game I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, Tottenham played with such heart, and I was like, I recognized the team. I was like, yeah, that's the team, that's the club that used to come to us when we were kids. And I was like, that's my club. That's who I belong to. That's who I support. And that's kind of how I became a fan, and that's how millions and millions of people become fans of clubs. It's in the neighborhood that they grew up in. It's in the community. They come down to the community. Now I live in America, right? I lived in New York all my life. I went to Knicks games. Never went to a football game, a Giants game, right? I went to school in this country too, but I don't remember the Knicks or the Giants or the Jets or the Brooklyn Nets now. I don't remember them ever doing anything for kids in the community. I know there's fundraisers, different events, but and it's not the same. And someone on Twitter, Troops from AFTV, said, football in Europe is not a business, right? NFL, NBA, NHL, American leagues are business leagues that make billions of dollars for owners of those teams, and a pie that's a lot of money that's split up between the teams in that league, right? European soccer is very different. And when you look at the structure of it, everyone's right when they say this is a fan-based sport. It's not a business-based sport. It has become business-based sports, right? When Tottenham's new stadium was built, that's when I knew football was dead. Tottenham built this stadium, and I studied urban planning in school and a bit of architecture, and I read the plans and the details of the stadium, and I'm looking this over, right? And I'm like, they have the longest bar in England. They have this roof that retracts. The football pitch, you could roll it up like a paper roll and have like an ice skating rink, layers of rinks below, layers of surfaces for American football, for ice skating, for different things. And it's $1 billion stadium, lots of money to build this stadium. And I'm like, I was thinking about it. I'm like, the football pitch where the game is actually being played, where you're actually, the reason you go to a stadium on a Saturday or Sunday or a Wednesday night or Thursday night if you're in Europa League, the reason you go to that stadium, the football, the actual football in the stadium was like the least thing in the stadium that they built, this new stadium that they developed. It was like the least important thing, right? When they advertised it was the longest bar, the longest this, the biggest this, the more people hired from the community to work the bar, to do this, most bathrooms, most this, biggest seats. It's an arena, right? Nothing much was mentioned about the football playing on the pitch, right? And I was like, they just built a stadium, but it didn't seem football was the primary reason for building a new stadium for Tottenham. Honestly, the old football pitch, White Hart Lane, there was no issues with it. Sitting capacity was a little shorter than what the owners would want in terms of selling tickets. And as fans, we're like, oh yeah, bigger stadium. You know, and they said the reason for the stadium is now Tottenham will compete on the world stage in Champions League football. And we have space for it now. And I said, there's something mixed in that message to us as fans. And I looked at that stadium, and I'm in New York, so I'm looking at it from across the pond. My best friend over there he did a walk through the stadium, sent me a thing of it. And I was like, Sean, like, that stadium's the whole block up High Road. And I'm looking at where I grew up in that neighborhood, so I'm looking at the shops around there that's now dwarfed by this mega structure. And I'm like, that's not football, that's entertainment. And this is what was my, I didn't say it, but that's in the back of my mind. I'm like, that's what football has become. And then I knew that it was all going downhill, because football was the last in the discussion of renovations, of improving the game. Football was the last thing discussed, right? Same thing with Newcastle Stadium. A lot of the stadiums, old Highbury became Emirates Stadium, right? To compete in Champions League football. This is where this is heading. It was heading to a Super League where it's all about selling an event. It's not about the sport itself. I'm going to do a separate video talking about the history of football in about maybe a minute. But, I expected now the Super League, they're saying they're not pulling back. They're going to double down on it. The owners of these teams, the British teams, they're all American owners. They all need money, they're saying. They lost money during COVID. It's been on the table. This Super League thing's been on the table for decades, maybe. And because they lost money, they need a return on that investment. Americans own these clubs. Business people own these clubs. Banks own these clubs, right? And like any business, you got some point. They stop giving stuff out, and now it's time to collect. And that's what they're doing. They're coming to collect. And it's their property, right? The owners of Arsenal and Manchester United Stadium and Tottenham, they're saying it's time to collect. It's our property. We want money from this thing. It's not making us more money. We're making money, but it's not making us more money by this Premier League BS and the Champions League BS. It's not making us any mullah. So we got to pull out and do the Super League thing. So it's here to stay. I think, like I said in my last video, I kind of said the 3 ideas about it. Why I understand it. I don't like it. I understand it. Football has become, in the EPL, become stagnant, right? BBC, some woman said, in the last 20, 30 years, the same 5 teams have won all the trophies, almost 99% of the trophies and titles. 5 teams out of 20 teams, out of 3-4 leagues of relegations and promotions. You're talking about like almost 100 clubs. 5 clubs, right? When you consider relegation promotions and all the divisions down to like, pub league, Sunday league soccer. 5 clubs have won everything, right? And that's the 5 richest clubs with money, right? The 5 clubs with the money to buy new stadiums, with owners overseas just doling out money. Now they want money back, right? And this is how they're gonna make that money. And my solution, I could do a solution video next, but I just want you guys to show you where I come from as a Tottenham fan, and why I probably, if this goes ahead, I'm gonna just not be a Tottenham fan anymore. It died. It's time to move on. Maybe I'll do fishing as a hobby now, or gardening or something like that. But football is dead, right? It's not here anymore. It's not the same. It hasn't been the same. Even when I got into it as an adult, I grew up in the culture in the 90s in England, and I know what it means to those people. It's not that anymore. And maybe I'm on the other side of the pond and I can see how it has changed, right? And people living in England, people living in Europe don't see how it has changed, because they're living in the structure of the change, so they don't really see the gradual changes. And I see it now, right? I see it, and it's sad, but it's the way it is. It's the way it's gonna be.